Arizona State's Kenny Dillingham did the unthinkable. The team that the media picked 16th in their league last year ends up in the college football playoff. More exposure, better recruiting. What is next for the Sun Devils?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the portal your first listen each and every day. We're here to talk recruiting, the NIL schemes, and everything else that comes with it to get the best players out of the portal and the recruiting world. So come back and check us out. Today, we're going to be talking about a team that fooled everybody, yours truly included. That would be the Arizona State Sun Devils, picked 16th. They ended up in the playoffs. They were a team to be reckoned with, and their roster, it's going to be changing with Kenny Dillingham. And how are they going to manage it? Well, to figure that out, there's a guy right here that knows a little bit about Arizona State, Richie Bradshaw, Locked On Sun Devils. Thank you for coming on the show, Richie. I appreciate it. First off, man, let's just give the 20-second shout-out, tip of the cap. I mean, from the back office, obviously Dillingham himself, the coaches, they had a decent running back or two. Cam Scatterby was just unbelievable. But they just found a way to be incredibly clutch, finding the right pieces. Did they have as much depth as some other teams? No. Did they have as many speed burners? No. But they overcame. Like, the receiver gets hurt towards the end of the year. They put in like a freshman or whatever, and he plays well. Like, they found different guys all the time. Why were they such a glue team? Did you have any idea early in the season that it was going to be crazy like that?
No, I mean, I definitely went into year two expecting this team to improve on where they were. They were a 3-9 team their first year with Kenny in 2023. They were in a lot of games. And if they were a team that knew how to win close games, they could have won 6 or 7 games. But, you know, that comes with learning and experience and growing with a new staff. So year two rolls around. What I said in the offseason was, I think a 7-5 season would be awesome. That is as optimistic as I can get. And lo and behold, they go out, they win 11 football games. They go to the college football playoff. They take Texas to double overtime. A couple different plays go a different way, and they might have been able to win the game. But what was so impressive to me was how quickly this team bought into the culture that Kenny Dillingham established and then handed off to his players, and the way that everyone bought in. And you have these veterans and you've got these youngsters, these transfers who come in, and they're all about it. And they see the Activate the Valley movement, and they see how quickly ASU fans will get invested when you give them a good product on the field, and everything starts culminating together. They buy into everything, and they end up being a team that shocks the world. And I think that they are primed to continue to do that. There's over 50 kids that are returning from last year's roster. You do lose Cam Scatterby, which that's about as tough as it's going to get. But your quarterback is back, your receiver's back, 4 of your 5 starters on the offensive line, almost the entire defense, the coaching staff, like, they're still intact to continue making a run. But how'd they do it? They did it by buying into each other.
Well, they started to do well in recruiting too, and it helped them. One of the kids that I met throughout the process was Isaiah Iasefa, kid out of Hawaii. He's a linebacker going to ASU. You know, you don't always get these superstar kind of players all the time, but he was a kid that had a bunch of different offers, ended up at Under Armour. They got Corey Butler out of Centennial, one of the best programs in the country, wide receiver on the edge of LA. What do you think they're going to be able to sell this next year? Because, I mean, Cameron Dyer and all these different talents, it's easier now. But, like, what is Kenny going to sell, in your opinion, to help build on the 24 run?
I think the biggest selling factor that Kenny has right now is look at how quickly everything is growing at ASU. His first year recruiting, 2023, when there was 6 recruits for Herm Edwards by the end of the season, and he had gotten fired 3 weeks in. So Kenny comes in, 5 of the kids decommit. CJ Fight is the lone guy who stays. He goes on to have a solid recruiting class, but Jaden Rashada, who was a super high 4-star / 5-star, comes to this program his first year, and it's like, oh, wow, okay, so Kenny can recruit. Like, we know that right out the gate. Obviously, it didn't work out with Rashada, but bringing a kid in of that caliber right away to a rebuild would be the nicest way to describe what Kenny inherited. Year 2 rolls around. Right. Rock bottom, and even below that. The second year, 2 4-stars come in with Jaden Fortier, the tight end, and running back Jason Brown. We didn't get to see much of them this year, but 4-stars are coming. This year, Cameron Dyer, who shot up high, he was like a 3-star for a minute, and then he turns into like a consensus 4-star just because of how good he is at football. But they land him. They got AJ Ia, a 4-star tight end, and now you're looking at 2026, and they already have one of the top 20 quarterbacks in the country with Jake Fetty committing. They've got
love him.
I do too. I'm really excited for Fetty, but the recruiting is just getting better and better because they're seeing what Kenny is building at ASU. He's already been a really good recruiter, but one of the things that me and you were talking about off mic was look at how ASU just got to a college football playoff appearance in year 2. And Kenny can tell these kids like, hey, you're the piece. You're the last piece we need to get over the top. If you want to win a national championship, we're right there. We need a couple of guys. You might be the guy who puts us over the top.
Well, that's kind of the way I would look at it. And if I was Kenny, that's how I'd pitch it. And I'd want my staff to buy into that. There is a secondary part to that. I just want to bring this up for Arizona State fans or anybody else, Big 12, whatever. They went from being the hunter 100% to being the hunted. After you make the playoff, everybody's going to circle you. Now, when I say that, you probably think, oh, you're just talking about games. No. Teams are going to negative recruit you to death. They're going to find anything they can if they make it up. Trust me, this is my world. They're going to, because they don't want a young coach who's charismatic, who, for whatever reason, the media loves the guy, gets a lot of free exposure. And like you said, in the Valley, it's one of the fastest growing communities in the United States. It's not hard to recruit there. That city as a recruiting hotbed is one of the top 5 rising in the country. And that's probably over the last decade. It's probably the best from where it was, say, late 90s to now, 25 years later. There's very little doubt in my mind. It's as good as it's going to get. Now, nobody wants to fix, especially in the Big 12. They could be, if they get through this year, I know they lost some key pieces, but starting in 26 especially, why wouldn't they be a top 3 team in the league most years? That's how I look at it, because really good coach, understands roster management and how to build a locker room, obviously, because he had a bunch of misfits.
Yeah.
And he put them together. Like, what school was it? Cam was at Sacramento State?
Sacramento State. He had
there you go.
One offer coming out of high school, 0-star recruit.
That's one of the greatest stories in the last 20 years, not of college football, just United States, sport or otherwise, like just randomness from nobody to holy cow, look at this guy.
Sensation.
Yeah, and he's going to play in the NFL, I'd imagine, for quite a while. So they figured that stuff out. Here's the other part. We touched upon the 25 class, but their recruiting class didn't stop there, because you also have to take into account, what did ASU do in the portal? You told me you expect not one, but 2 guys from the portal just to start at corner. Green, Breedlove, some of these guys, they got receiver that's going to play, Jared Hamilton. They have a lot of talent coming in there. And I know the Big 12 is wild every year. I wouldn't gamble on where anybody's going to rank in that freaking league. It's impossible. But if Arizona State finished in the top 3 again this year, would I be surprised? No, there's precedent. So if they could somehow, let's say, go into the final weekend against Arizona and they're still in the hunt, all that moment, it could change the program again. And I'm not baying against them. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And one of the things that is really big that Kenny Dillingham has brought up before, and with you being the recruiting expert, Arizona high school football has a lot of talent.
It is. It's good.
So much of it has left the state because Herm Edwards and Antonio Pierce were so focused on Southern California that these kids that are in your backyard who want to stay home end up going other places because ASU just doesn't pursue them hard enough. And Kenny Dillingham has recognized that, which is where that Activate the Valley movement comes from, is he sees how good these kids in the backyard are, and he wants to keep them home. So right now he's working the body, and you see the Texas kids that are coming to Arizona State, and you know what you're doing. The 3 stars in Texas are 4 stars in a lot of other states, so they're
100%.
doing a good job there. But now it's about keeping these kids in the state, and a huge thing is winning that Territorial Cup against Arizona. If you want to stay in state, you want to stay with the better team, and it's a pretty good selling point to go to the team that is owning that rivalry. And ASU has owned it for the last 30 plus years. If they continue to stay on track with that, and now that Kenny is interested in the hometown kids, you might be able to really just build this team through the kids that are in your backyard, let alone Texas, California, wherever else they decide to dip their toes into.
I agree. And to that point, I think there's a key ingredient we need to discuss wholeheartedly to figure out if they're going to be able to close the deal on some elite recruits, and that is NIL. That is next here on the Portal. Attention to all the Portal fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table. That is 100% true. And fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes that they love. Now, with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support Arizona State or any other school that you want for the athletes, and it's as transparent as it can get. You can choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, receive exclusive content from the athletes you back, and the best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control, no more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of the college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Arizona State athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading the Roy app and supporting your favorite players for Arizona State. NIL. Like it, love it, many hate it. It is here. It's not going anywhere. I've had some speculation based on who they didn't get, some kids that left, comments that Kenny Dillingham's made openly, sometimes unsolicited, that their NIL didn't match in fill in the blank, like Texas, kind of different. Ohio State's kind of different. Georgia, something. Where do you think they stand, and how far are they away? Because like the Texas schools, the oil money, like what Texas Tech's doing, Baylor, TC, some of that stuff is gross. Oklahoma State's and others. I know that T-Bone Pickens is no longer with us. May he rest in peace. But the facilities and all, he spent over like $500 million on his own. It's insane. Does ASU have anything coming down the pipeline? Do you see any way for them to, quote unquote, take a step up with their NIL game?
I do. And if you look at where ASU was 2 years ago, with Herm Edwards still around and Ray Anderson was still the athletic director, ASU didn't even have an NIL collective. Like there was nothing there. When Jaden Daniels was still the quarterback at ASU, the first NIL thing we ever saw, it was a local pizza shop. I can't remember what it was, but he had the JD5 pizza or something like that. And it was like pepperoni, mushroom, and one other thing. And it was just like his personal pizza made together. That was the first NIL thing we had. That was 2019 or 2020. They didn't have a collective or anything. And ASU, like, behind the 8 ball was a compliment at that point. But the Sun Angel collective gets established. And it's a slow growing thing because, again, when you look at sports in Arizona, it's tough to get fans to consistently want to invest in the program. There's a lot to do out here. If you're not putting a good product on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever it is, it's hard to get fans to consistently invest. And it becomes difficult to get everybody to invest in an NIL collective where I'm paying monthly, yearly, whatever, and they're not doing anything on the field. So that was something that was important to get rolling, but it was also something that we look at and you're like, it's going to take a few years. And we're going into year 3 with Kenny, and it's taken a huge step forward, but you are still really far behind when it comes to these other schools. And they've termed ASU the sleeping giant for a very long time because of all the resources that are available to them from their location, the fact that they're one of the biggest universities in the world, have everything to offer academically, and the history that they had with Frank Kush back in the 70s. Like, we've seen a good football program here. It's just been gone for a while. And now with the NIL game here, ASU's got to find a way to catch up. And it's slowly moving. There's a huge amount of difference from where we were 5 years ago, 2 years ago, compared to where we are now. And it's awesome, but there's still a lot of room to grow and improve. There's potential out here, but it's a slow process for ASU right now. You are on mute, good sir.
I muted myself. I'll get you out of here on this. ASU, obviously, great season last year. They take the step forward. NIL, there's no way NIL contributions aren't going to go better because you won. That's just the nature of human beings. I don't need any help with that. At what point do you think ASU, or what level do they have to do this year? Or is there any kind of barometer that you think they have to reach to make you think, obviously you're a supporter, that you're like, okay, this is a long-term thing? Because I'll just tell people now, Richie and I think that barring something very unforeseen, Dillingham's going to stick around for quite a while. He loves the school, likes living there, all of that. What is the barometer they have to reach this year to make you feel really comfy that ASU is a contender in the Big 12 and they can be a national program?
I think it's obviously continuing to win football games and show that you are one of the heavyweight favorites to win the Big 12 again, which throws you right back into the college football playoff where you just had a bye. You just took on Texas and took them to double overtime. Like, is this a Cinderella team or is this a preview of things to come? So they need to show that this is going to be sustainable annual success for this program. And you could see that from some of the recruits that they have. So you bring in transfer quarterback Sam Levitt and transfer receiver Jordan Tyson, and they explode last year. And I expect them to be one of the best quarterback receiver combos in the Big 12 next year. And who knows, based off of the way they were performing towards the second half of the season, maybe they could make shockwaves across all the nation, but cross that road when you get to it. But what I'm most excited about this year is, typically with a new head coach, year 3 is the big one, because now you're going to see their recruiting classes that are on the field. These kids are going to be juniors and redshirt sophomores, redshirt freshmen, all that good stuff. Now it's time to see, is your recruiting going to pay off? Or is it not so much a flash in the pan, but you need to figure out if this is sustainable because you are having young kids come in and take on roles with the program for the future. And they've had some young kids. CJ Fight, one of the guys you mentioned earlier, has started since he was a true freshman. Keith Abney, who's one of their number one corners, did not get to redshirt his freshman year because he saw the field so much, and then he was a full-time starter this year. There's some other young guys that are in line for bigger roles this year. So if you are able to show, one, that you can continue winning football, and two, that the guys you recruited in your first year are going to inherit bigger roles and they pay off, that's really going to show a lot of fans. It's going to show a lot of recruits that, yeah, there's something going on here. There is something in the water in Tempe, Arizona, that's going to lead to that sustainable success for this program.
The one thing for me that I want to see, and obviously I'm a recruiting nut, the Portal podcast is about recruiting, NIL, and the transfer portal. Can they find a way to get some of the big body guys? Historically, the teams that win big, they are big. Look at Texas. When they walked out on the field, somebody I know was at the game, he goes, the difference between the two teams was pretty different with D tackle, et cetera, different kind of styles. But can they get some of the elite high school kids at O tackle, D tackle, and maybe a few interior guys on the offense that are just maulers? That'll tell me something, because there's just fewer of them, and the NIL game for them is often very high. In other words, even if a guy's worth $500,000 by market standards, because of the position they play, supply and demand, my friend. I'll be curious how that NIL works out for them. And then again, Arizona State has a program on the rise. It's probably a lot of fun to play for a young coach like Kenny, but you got to close the deal. They got to win a few battles against teams like Colorado's throwing around money, Texas, TCU, and then SC's gone crazy here lately, and they recruit that area heavy too. So I'm curious if they can win. They got to get some of the LA kids. That's not a newsflash. That's always been the key to Arizona State. They got to steal a few of those kids in Michigan, Notre Dame. Some of those schools come in there too. If they get a few of those guys to go with what they've already done, I think Arizona State can be a top 10 program. Again, it's not that hard to recruit to Phoenix. I've been there. It's not very difficult to sell. So I think they are on that cusp. This is a huge year for Arizona State recruiting. And coming off that momentum, it's probably a pretty fun time for Kenny calling up recruits right now. I would think so. I mean,
Yes.
unless you got something to tell me, I don't know. But
No, not as far as I know. And one thing I want to add to your point that you were saying, if you find ways to get the recruits from LA, or you compete with Ohio State and Notre Dame, Michigan, Texas, all those teams, you get that recruit, others are going to notice. They're going to go,
yes.
Really? Five-star kid going to Arizona State. What's going on there? Okay, I want to see what's going on. Something I said when Kenny Dillingham got hired in 2023, despite it being a horrible program, I said, I guarantee you, while he is here, a 5-star will commit to the program. Guarantee it, 100%. It's taking time, but they're getting 4-star kids in pretty consistently now. And again, you land that kid who goes to ASU instead of Alabama or Ohio State, other kids are going to look. They're going to go, what's going on at Arizona State? That's my buddy. You know, we played high school football together. Why is he going there? I want to know what's going on there.
I 100% agree, Richie. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. Tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
You can find me hosting Locked On Sun Devils, which is wherever you get your shows, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all that good stuff. If you want to have a conversation with me on Twitter, you can find me at Richie Brads. That's Brads with a Z, 36. The podcast is there at LO_Sun Devils as well.
Thank you, sir. You can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, every place you want to go. On YouTube, just type in LO the Portal. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe. We will see you again soon.